Welcome to It's a Woman's World, a show which discusses any and all topics under the sun from a woman's point of view. Here's today's moderator, Nadia Giordana.
Hello and welcome to It's a Woman's World. I'm Nadia Giordana and we have a great show lined up for you today. But first, let me introduce my co-hosts, Candy Pettiford.
Yeah.
Candy, it's so fun to have you here today.
Nadia, I'm glad I'm back for just a moment.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll get you back again another time.
I'm loving
too.
it. I'm loving it.
All right,
Thank you.
that sounds wonderful. And also Beverly Crosby.
And it's great being here on this side of the table.
I know you're usually in the control room helping us out that way.
Right. So thank you for having me here today.
Well, it's our pleasure. And our special guest today is Katie Yost. Katie, you are, let's see what I have here, research and advocacy expert for World Without Genocide.
Yep, that is
Tell us a little bit about World Without Genocide. We've had people from that organization on the show before, but this is a brand new program today. And what you do for that program.
Okay. So World Without Genocide is a nonprofit human rights organization. We are located at Mitchell-Hamlin School of Law in St. Paul. Our mission is to protect innocent people, prevent genocide by combating racism and prejudice, advocate for the prosecution of perpetrators, and remember those whose lives and cultures have been destroyed by genocide.
Wow.
Okay, and what do you do there?
So my job as the research and advocacy coordinator is to I do the research for different presentations and talks that we're giving on various human rights topics. I coordinate different advocacy initiatives that we undertake, and those are constantly changing. There's always new issues that need to be addressed. So it's a very interesting job.
You said it's international. What international means? Which countries? Europe or everywhere? The third world countries?
So we advocate for different international issues. We advocate for the International Criminal Court to be ratified by the United States. We advocate for different UN conventions that the U.S. has not ratified yet, specifically the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women and the Convention on the Rights of the Child are two different international UN conventions that we advocate for.
Well, what part of the job do you really like? Your job? What do you like about it?
I think my favorite part of the job is getting to work hands-on with different people, different organizations, and being able to collaborate and to figure out how to go about addressing different human rights issues that arise.
Do you ever get any like Hollywood stars? Because some of them want to get on the bandwagon and say, I don't like this, I don't like that. And do you ever work with any Hollywood stars?
Not specifically, not yet anyways.
Okay.
We haven't had anyone come to us yet, but we definitely do work with a lot of kind of bigger names in the community.
Local celebrities and things like that.
Sure,
Maybe in TV and media. Yeah. Well, now, one of the things that I think you advocate for has to do with rape and how that falls into genocide and how that is used. Can you talk about that on an international scale first?
Yeah, so rape is used in almost every genocide. It was used in the Holocaust, Rwanda, Bosnia, Burma, and almost every mass atrocity you can think of. It is used to humiliate women, break up families, and especially to weaken communities. One of the biggest issues, raping and pillaging kind of became normalized during conflict. It became this expected trend. So it's something that happens at the international level in conflict, in genocide, and something that we see at the local level as well.
And throughout history, I mean, you hear about the phrase raping and pillaging is as much of a joke as it is a serious subject because it's so far back into history that, like with the Vikings and the Norsemen and things like that, it's more presented in a manner that it was a manly, funny thing that used to happen, and it's lost track of what it actually had its roots in, but it goes way back, doesn't it?
Yes, it definitely does.
But you said before, break up families. Tell us, how does rape break up families?
In different conflicts and mass atrocities in different countries, it is very shameful to be raped. And these women don't want to come forward. They don't want to talk about it. Their husbands sometimes feel shame.
Will their husband leave them? Is that what you're saying? Why you say break up?
That could happen, yes.
That could happen in some cultures,
Oh, for
even in
sure.
our culture.
Oh, for sure.
So it's a really sad atrocity that a lot of people are left and they don't know how to deal with it.
So what does that do for the children? I mean, all this is going, we're talking about the husband and the wife, but what about the children now?
That's another very hard aspect of it. Different things happen to different children. In some genocides and some mass atrocities, children have actually witnessed their mothers being sexually assaulted, and they have also had husbands forced to witness this happen to their wife, and it's used as a power play.
Sure.
And it's just horrifying.
Yeah, that's even more destructive to the family. It's one thing to hear about it, but to have to be forced to be helpless and watch that's going to be really hard on the families, including the victims. Well, they're all victims.
Exactly.
So where do you step in? What does your organization do when you have a concern, a focus? What actions do you take?
Yeah. So a lot of what we do is education-based. So we raise awareness about these topics because a lot of people don't know that this is going on. And then we also, the second part of our approach is the advocacy step. So we don't want to just go talk to people and tell them what is happening without giving them something they can do about it. On the international level, we advocate for the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, known as CEDAW. So that works to address these kind of things on the international level. And then we also have different advocacy initiatives that we work for at the local level to address rape and sexual assault in Minnesota and the nation.
And on the local level, is this for Minnesota residents, or does that include people who have immigrated here and have been subject to this atrocity as far as from their native country?
Well, we are working to advocate for a bill to get passed in the legislature that would help people in Minnesota, specifically everyone that is here that has had something like this happen to them.
Okay.
And the bill, what would the bill say? What do you hope will come out of that?
We are working to get sexual assault evidence kits tested, which is a big part of why rapists are not getting prosecuted or convicted here in the United States.
Can you explain what a kit is?
Yeah. So when someone is sexually assaulted, they go to the hospital and they will get a forensic examination. And normally it's done by a sexual assault nurse examiner called a SANE nurse. And they will collect swabs, tissues, clothing, any evidence they can, and they will place it into a box. And that is known as a sexual assault evidence collection kit, which is referred to as a rape kit.
And all hospitals have this?
Yes, all hospitals can do this. Not all hospitals have as many SANE nurses to administer these in the best way. But I think hospitals are definitely trying to improve that and get more training for nurses.
When did you know you wanted to get involved in this? When you personally said, this is something that I want to really tackle? When did you?
Yeah. So my executive director came to me with the issue, and it was something that I had heard about before, but I didn't know about in detail. So I kind of did a little digging, did a little research on the topic, and thought that it was kind of insane that this is happening to us here at home, and no one's really doing anything about it.
Right.
And rapists are able to walk the streets because they're not being convicted of their crime. And it's a really sad ordeal, and it's something that I felt passionately about.
Exactly.
And I think every woman can kind of get behind the
Oh, I think
idea.
so too.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I went to the website, End the Backlog, which I think you mentioned in your email, and I went to the state Minnesota and looked up some statistics for Minnesota. Oh, and where was it? And this will bring up some additional questions. Untested kits in Minnesota stand at about, and I don't know how many there have been altogether, but 3,482. That means kits that have been collected, have been used, and are there at the hospital or somewhere else in storage and haven't been tested. And what does that mean for DNA, and what can you say about that?
So when a kit gets tested, they collect DNA from the swabs and the samples from the victim's body, and then they can match it. They'll put it into a DNA database known as CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System. And that has DNA from criminal offenders, and it's nationwide. So if you have a sample from a rape kit and you put it into the DNA database, it can say, oh, there's a hit here, this person committed a rape here and here and here. So it can kind of, it can link crimes together, it can identify serial offenders, and it is just a wonderful system that is not being used enough.
Why? What are some of the reasons that they wouldn't test every single kit? Is it because the victim doesn't want to press charges? Is it financial, or are there some other reasons?
There are a variety of reasons. Some of it is financial. Kits, the cost of testing one kit costs anywhere between $500 and $1,500.
Oh, boy.
So it is a cost. There are some victims that choose not to go through the criminal system. They do not want to do that, and that is completely okay. And also there is sort of a lack of training that often happens on the hands of law enforcement. And there's also a culture of victim blaming that's going on. People don't want to believe rape victims.
Exactly.
And there's actually research that has shown that, unfortunately, a lot of law enforcement officers disbelieve sexual assault victims more than any other victim.
What are some of the reasons for that? I mean, I understand that they might not believe all victims in a lot of different crimes. Some of that's true.
Yes, but who's going to make up rape?
I know, and why is that disproportionate?
Yeah, it's really hard. I think it's hard for most of us to wrap our heads around. The FBI says that between 2 and 8% of rapes are falsely reported, and that falls in line with every other crime. So it's a very, very, very small percentage. But we have this culture where we think that it couldn't be his fault. You know, we don't ever want to believe that someone committed an act as heinous as this. So a lot of times,
Blinders on and things like that.
and we tend to blame the victim. You know, we ask, what was she wearing? How much did she drink? Was she flirting? Did she ask for it? And that all contributes to it.
So this test, going back to the test, is there the actual victim, they're in shock. They can deny having that test taken as well, right? There's
Yeah.
nothing legal stating that they need to have this.
No, not at all. A lot of times victims go to the hospital just to get a checkup, check for STDs, pregnancy, all of those sort of things. And then they can decide they do not want to do the forensic examination, or they can decide that they want to do it and they do not want to submit the kit to the police. So they can keep the kit and they can have it stored, and they can decide later maybe they do want to go forward with a criminal investigation.
And that was my next question was, if they weren't actually tested, or if they took the DNA, the sample, but it wasn't tested fully, and say 2 years later they decide that they want to press charges, can they go back and then find the DNA?
Yeah, that's an option. The only problem is for states that have no laws on how long to keep kits, what to do with them. A lot of times they are thrown out, gotten rid of, or before the victim decides to come forward. So some places around the country have been throwing out these evidence kits after 60 days.
Oh,
wow.
That's short. I was
Yes.
thinking a couple
That's
of
short.
years.
A lot of other places, it just all varies by department. So it's not even, if a state doesn't have a law, it varies by department and what they want to do. So that is why a lot of states have been moving to pass laws that mandate, we need to hold on to a kit for at least 2 years. Some are saying 10 years, or until the statute of limitations expires.
What is it state here in Minnesota?
I'm not 100% sure on the statute of limitations here in Minnesota. It varies significantly state to state. Some few states have life as the statute of limitation for rape, but that has been a more recent trend. States have been pushing to get that extended.
Now, there's been times where guys have gone to jail, but haven't sometimes these rape kits exonerated them and said,
I was thinking
yeah,
that.
because some of them haven't they been exonerated and said, this is not the person.
Exactly.
Because of the DNA.
Exactly.
It could
that
work
has-
both ways.
It can work both
Yeah.
ways.
That has happened, and that's why it's so important to
Yes.
test these kits, because you could be putting someone away in jail. That's not the
When there would be nothing worse than that. You know, you think about the victim on one side,
That's
but
right.
to wrongfully accuse someone is, you know, absolutely as wrong on the other side. So
right.
this kit can work for both.
exactly.
I mean, I've
For
heard of a
both
guy
sides.
being in jail for about a year, and then they came forward finally with the kit.
Yeah.
And the guy had been there already a year, and it wasn't him.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, your whole life, a year has been out of your life.
That's enough
So
to wreck it.
That's, yeah.
When I think of a kit, I think of this box. you
I
know.
think of, I
That's
guess
the way
I
I
do too.
picture
How
it.
big is this, or, how much room does it take to store these?
They're probably about that big.
Oh,
that
bigger than
heavy.
I thought.
Oh,
A little bit larger, yeah. They do have a lot of evidence in them. Some of them will have the victim's clothes.
Clothes, I was just thinking if they were to hold some clothing.
Sure.
So it's not always swabs. It's a lot of
Yeah.
different things.
Okay, okay.
well, what can we do to get involved? How do we get involved in this as just like a regular
Yeah.
citizen? How do we?
I think that's a very important question, and it's one of my favorite questions to
Oh, good.
answer.
Okay.
One of the biggest and simplest things you can do is to talk about it.
Oh.
To bring up this issue of sexual assault to different people and say, hey, this is going on in our communities and we can do something about it. Being able to talk about it gets rid of that culture of victim blaming.
Yeah, that's right.
And, it allows more people to come forward. People don't want to come forward a lot of times after sexual assault because
No.
it is, there's some sort of shame, and then they fear that people won't believe them because traditionally that is what happens. So I think talking about it is a huge, huge step. I also think that everyone can tell their elected officials that we need laws that mandate that these kits get tested in a timely manner and don't end up on police storage facilities for 20 years. That's a huge step, and just by making a phone call.
Maybe even funding for that purpose.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of different ways to go about making a difference.
What about groups and support groups and places where victims of sexual assault can go to? Are there a lot of groups out there?
Yeah, there are a lot of wonderful groups that have taken on this issue. There are a lot of centers for support for victims that have gone through this, that maybe need to get away from their attacker. There are places that can provide temporary housing, provide legal resources, a lot of different services that are out there.
I didn't think about legal resources. Yeah. What about a situation where, say, the victim doesn't have any resources to pursue? What are available to her in that manner as far as legal resources?
Yeah, a lot of different organizations. The Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Assault is a wonderful organization that we have teamed up with a lot on raising awareness about this issue, and they have wonderful staff that will kind of show people what resources they have if they do want to pursue a criminal investigation and trial, what that's going to be like, what that's going to take on. And then they also will provide resources for if you don't want to do this, what are your options? They'll provide resources for counseling, stuff like that. So.
Do the hospitals have information that they give to the people, to the victims that come in?
A lot of SANE nurses, the sexual assault nurse examiners, they are trained specifically to administer sexual assault forensic examinations and to provide these victims with services, what avenues they can take. So they are a wonderful, wonderful resource for these people.
So what's the first step? Let's say a woman has been raped. What's the first step they try to do? They get her to the police first? What's the first steps do they do?
Always the hospital.
Okay.
That's always the first step, the most
time
important.
might be important.
Time might be important. Time is important. And, I keep coming back to these wonderful nurses, having someone there for them after something so traumatic that knows how to talk to these people, knows how to handle these cases. It's just very, very important.
So the
Very
hospital is the
valuable.
first step. And then does the police get involved? That's the next step? Or-
If a victim consents to or wants to pursue a criminal investigation, then that's when the police will be notified, and then they will kind of guide them through the next steps.
Now I have a really strange question.
Yes.
Are rape kits used against, like, a husband and wife? Can she say, my husband? I mean, help me with what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah. So I guess intermarriage rape,
Right.
it does happen, and it's something that is very pushed under the rug. A lot of people
Okay.
think it should not be, some people think it shouldn't be considered rape. Some states have only recently passed laws that say it is rape.
It is
Okay.
fairly recent, isn't it?
It is. But these kits can be used in that. The problem is it's going to be a he said, she said
Right.
argument when taking that forward.
He's my husband, she's my wife. Oh, yeah, that's kind of touchy, isn't it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of obstacles in prosecuting rapes because a lot of times there's only two people there, two witnesses. A lot of times there's no one else that can testify that they saw it. So a lot of times it's he said, she said.
Well, what happens if there are children involved? Do they want to get the child and say, this is, I saw this, let's not even say it's a dad and mom. Let's just say the rapist came in and whatever, and the child is there. Do they want to get the child involved? How do they deal with that?
I'm not 100% certain on how that is handled. I'm guessing it would be up to counselors.
And maybe the mom might say, I don't want my son, my daughter to You know,
Yeah,
it's
I
too
think it's
touchy.
going to be a judgment call.
Because
on
they have to
behalf of
relive it
the-
again to tell it.
Case by case
Yeah.
basis, yeah.
And then sometimes the children are afraid of, say the
Oh,
father or the
absolutely.
mother, so they're just gonna go
Yeah,
along with
yeah.
whatever they think they need to say.
Yeah.
Been told to be quiet.
Exactly.
So,
Don't tell anybody.
Don't tell anybody,
You know,
so,
you didn't see that.
wow.
But, yeah, case by case,
Yeah, I
like you
would
were
say so.
saying. Mhm.
Minnesota, where does Minnesota fall as far as being proactive compared to other states?
So Minnesota, unfortunately, has kind of not done a lot on this
Are we
issue.
a little behind?
Oh, no, are
Yeah.
we behind?
I thought we
Behind.
might. I'm surprised. yeah.
Oh,
So I believe 12 states now have passed laws that mandate that all rape kits in the future get tested within a certain time frame, say 60 days. And then they also mandate that the current backlog gets tested. And then
Are there labs? Where does the testing happen?
it does happen in labs. Some of it is state labs, some of them get sent to private labs. It all just kind of depends. But currently, we have no law that mandates that these kits get tested. We are kind of on the back end.
We need to get
Yes.
on the stick there.
Yes.
wow.
But thankfully, the Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Assault has worked with some wonderful legislators. They have drafted a bipartisan bill, which is wonderful. And I think it's very important to note that most bills that have been passed in other states are completely bipartisan.
That is
That's
great.
very
It's
good.
one of the few issues nowadays that both sides of the
They can
aisle can
agree
get
on.
behind. Yeah.
Oh, good.
So we are hoping that bill will be heard in 2018, and hopefully our state legislators now feel strongly enough about the issue that they take it on, and we are one of the states, hopefully, that will have one of those laws.
Excellent.
Well, Katie, thank you. It's been really great having you on the show and shining a light so that we could have this
Yes.
discussion.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was great having you here. And Beverly, thank
It's been a
you.
pleasure. I learned a lot.
Candy,
Oh, this was exciting.
this was
Thank you, Katie.
interesting. And thanks to all of you out there in TV land for watching us today on It's a Woman's World.